It's that time, but with two of us here, I don't think we make a quorum yet, so let's give it a few minutes. Unfortunately, there are a couple other committees meeting right now, and I apologize for the postponement. I think this is the third time we've scheduled one, but we've had trouble getting a room. That's why we're over here today. So. Okay, let's call this first meeting of the Defense of Veterans Affairs Committee to order. And since this is our first meeting of the year, I'd like to go around and let everybody just give a brief introduction of who you are and where you represent. So if we start off with Ms. Representative Scott.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm State Representative Sandra G. Scott, District 76, Clinton and Henry County.
State Representative Brian Prince out of Augusta, Georgia, represent parts of Richmond County as well as Jefferson County.
Hello, I'm Scott Holcomb. I represent District 81, which is DeKalb and Gwinnett counties.
Turn the light on there.
Okay.
I'm Daryl Elam. I represent Albany, Georgia, Doherty County, but more importantly, I represent the Marine Corps Logistics Base in Albany, Georgia.
And my name is Bill Hitchens. I represent House District 161, which is part of Savannah, Chatham County, and the southern half of Effingham County. What we're going to do today is call the bills and the resolutions and give the representative an opportunity to present the bill. Then we'll open it up for questions from members of the committee. And after we finish that, we'll give anybody that's in the audience the opportunity to speak if they have any issues with the bill, pro or con. Once that concludes, we'll take a vote. And this is Representative Jackson. He's he represents just south of Atlanta, Fayette County, or Fayette and South Fulton. And so let's get started. The first bill on the agenda today is from Representative Brad Rassenberger from its House Bill 681. Yeah, I was going to wait. Is that it?
Sorry, sir.
Go ahead, if you would, read off your bill number and the LC number.
I bring before the committee today House Bill 681, LC 440631. The purpose of this bill is to thank honorably discharged Georgia domiciled veterans by waiving the corporation filing fee for 3 years. It's a way for us to say thank you for your service. It's also an encouragement for a veteran to form a corporation, lowering the barriers to market entry for our veterans. It also keeps our veterans here in Georgia, or it's an inducement to keep them here. Many of our veterans weren't born in Georgia, end up being stationed here. And so when they complete their service, if this would be a way that we could then encourage them to stay here, I think that's for the benefit of the entire state of Georgia. We don't want some honorably discharged veteran move back to Nebraska, Kansas, or wherever. He has lots of choices, or they have lots of choices. So this is a way to, maybe they would stay here in Georgia, form a corporation. We have several military installations throughout the state of Georgia. And as I've traveled throughout the state, I've seen veterans, saw down at Robins Air Force Base, a veteran got out, formed a corporation. He's producing jobs for Georgians, and he's building a life, after the military, still living in Warner Robins. I think that's tremendous. And when you look at what's happening now with Fort Gordon, with the Cybersecurity Center, and look at all of our other military installations, I think if we can do something to encourage business growth, would be a tremendous thing. This bill came about from me having a discussion with a veteran, and one of the things that we talked about is that when anyone signs up for military service, they in effect are writing a blank check. So today what we'd be offering is to waive that for 3 years, and it's a small return for what they have done for our country. And that's my presentation. Thank you, sir.
Do you have any questions? Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few questions. One is, can you give an example of a foreign limited liability partnership that a veteran might be forming?
No. I couldn't. We don't really know what kind of corporation they would want to form, and so we just broadened it to allow all corporations.
Okay. I'm having a hard time understanding how it would be a foreign limited liability partnership. I understand the others,
Okay.
but I don't understand that. And it doesn't sound like you do either. Okay. Second question is, your presentation, your statement was that the purpose of this is to thank veterans. This would be prospective, so for people going forward, if the purpose is to thank veterans, even those that currently have their businesses, wouldn't you want to waive the fees from 3 years after the enactment of this law? So those like the veteran that you were talking about would be able to benefit from it instead of just new companies?
If that's the will of the committee, I would consider that a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Representative Prince.
Thank you. And thank you, Representative Holcomb. That was, your second question was one of my first ones about making sort of retroactive, if that was the case. Another thing, and as you mentioned in your statement about thanking us for our services, and I'm retired, I am a veteran, but I remember, and I think we have most of us are as well, who volunteered. It was not that we were drafted, no one held a gun to our head in order to do that. And again, this is coming from a veteran, okay? The funds that this corporate funds for 3 years, right now I understand they go into maybe an operating fund, a state operating fund. So do we have a fiscal impact on, or note on what's going to be, what we're going to be less of, and where was, and it's going to be a detected from somewhere. And if that's the case, with education, not being able to fully fund QBE and things like that, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, to determine how many people would actually avail themselves of this would actually require an estimate conjecture or a fiscal note, but we haven't done that. Is there really a way of knowing? We know how many veterans would be available for this if it passed, perhaps, but how many actually would decide that they want to form a corporation? So it's somewhat, I don't know how you'd really quantify that. You just have to almost see what happens. But I do know that right now, currently, through license fees and business licensing, the Secretary of State's office takes in about $80 million, and the budget is $50. I don't believe that this would be a significant impact.
One more question, Mr. Chair. One more follow-up.
Go ahead.
With that, I understand. With that being said, do we have is there some? I know you say you talked to a friend or a veteran of reference this. Is there some notion out there that veterans are not starting businesses in Georgia because of this corporation fee?
No, I just believe that whenever we can lower barriers for people forming corporations, it's a good thing. And this, to me, was one way of really thanking veterans and also lowering barriers of entry for new business formation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Elam?
We have a military affairs study committee. Have you talked with John Belton on this at all, Representative Belton?
He's one of the signers on this bill.
Okay. A follow-up?
Sure.
It seems like you're opening the floodgates here for anyone with any military service. That is concern for me. I mean, someone, if I'm understanding this correctly, and help me out with this, let's say someone served in the National Guard in California, and they came to Georgia, would they fall under this auspice?
If they were honorably discharged and Georgia domiciled, yes, they would be. So that would, to me, imply that they would then be relocating to Georgia.
Well, you don't say that. You just say, okay, then let me help you. Let me clarify my concern. Let's say that person is and in Georgia, corporations, I have a family corporation, we're incorporated, and you have to have a president and a secretary treasurer. So two officers at a minimum. Let's say this person was in California, they retired or had honorable discharge in California, and then they had their buddy in Georgia, and their buddy could open up, and he lives in Georgia, then he could open up a corporation in Georgia and not pay the fees, and this person is in California. Is that what we're saying here? Is that a possible real scenario, or am I?
Is it possible that the system could be gamed?
I see the way it's written right now, it could really easily be gamed, because we're opening it up to every National Guard, every state. I don't have a problem with this concept at all if that person had served in Georgia in one of our militaries, and we're blessed here. We have every service represented in the state, and they served honorably with one of our services in Georgia, and this was going to keep them in Georgia and be productive in Georgia. I think it's a good idea, but I see so many loopholes for this to be gamed as I understand it now, unless you can help me better with it.
Well, I ran this by the Secretary of State's office and Legislative Council, and they both reviewed it. We were trying not to make it so restrictive, but if it's the will of the committee to tighten it up in a few areas, that would be the will of the committee.
A follow-up, sir?
Sure.
I'm concerned about I'm a veteran as well. I'm concerned about helping our veterans if it's going to be advantageous to them and the state of Georgia. And so if it could be written as such, that's the concept behind this, and it's cleaner and more sure that that's going to happen, I would feel a lot more comfortable with the bill. If you could help me with understanding how that's the case, but I just, reading it very quickly, I could see how it could really be gamed.
I appreciate your concern. The challenge you have with any corporation is that many corporations are not, in effect, sole proprietorship, where you have the owner, the CEO, he's everything, or they are everything in the corporation. So it's a recognition that you have multiple owners in a corporation. Perhaps if you wanted to have there the managing partner would be Georgia domiciled and also be the veteran, that would alleviate or answer your concern.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to follow up on Representative Elam's point because I think he's right that this, as written in the managing partner idea or managing member, if it's an LLC, might be right, because for most companies that they're not big public companies with boards that are selected through a pretty extensive process. I could just start up a company and then go to any one of the folks on this committee and say, hey, you don't have to do anything, but just sign my articles of incorporation so I can get this waiver for 3 years. And that's not what we're looking to do. What we're trying to do is companies that actually legitimately have veterans as the heart and soul of their structure, right?
Yes.
The other thing is, while I'm generally supportive, my understanding is that the corporate filing fee is $50 and the nonprofit filing fee is $30. I don't know that anybody would not start a company if this weren't enacted, but I do agree that it's helpful in terms of just a thank you, if that's sort of where we want to go. But I don't think that this alone is going to, if all you have is a $50 waiver for 3 years, but no capital, no assets, no ideas, then you're not going to have a successful company. So this isn't alone going to get you there. So more comments than questions, but I think the bill in its current form would need to be tightened up to limit it to just those that we'd want to help. And I could be supportive with a bill that was tighter.
And the only question I had, and I guess Representative Holcomb's answer is, I had no idea what the I Incorporated wants back in '97, but it seemed like it was a minor fee as opposed to the legal expenses to get there.
Right.
Was that correct, sir? Oh, yeah.
Well, it's actually $100 for the first year, for the first filing, and then $50 renewal for every subsequent years.
Any other questions from any members of the committee? Anybody in the audience that would like to comment on this? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Copy Johnson with the Board of Chamber. We'd like to thank Representative Rapp for presenting this bill forward. It's clear that we are supportive of at the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. A couple of years ago, in conjunction with not only majority leadership, but also minority leadership of the Commerce Tech Initiative, pushing Georgia to make sure that we are ready for BRAC, understanding that BRAC is more about bases and creating a community outside of that base that is livable and good for all the entire family, whether they're serving or outside of service, is something that the chamber is interested in. We believe this bill takes a good stab at it. We are happy to work with the bill author and those who want to see the bill tightened up to come to a finished product, because we believe the idea is a good one in the second one.
Well, I think it's very positive. Nobody here from the Secretary of State's office? I took the liberty of having a conversation with him just to be certain, and Representative Rasmusberger was there one time when I spoke with him, but they neither want to approve or disapprove. They're neutral on this. Whatever the committee decides and whatever the legislature and the governor decide will be okay with them. So what do we want to do here, Representative? Do you want to take it back and try and tighten it up? I think the amendment process here would be very difficult.
Right. I would welcome the opportunity to take it back, and if there's some committee members that have expressed concern, I'd like to work with them. It appears that Representative Holcomb would probably be my, and you, Mr. Chairman, would that be the best two folks for me to
I
reach
think
out to?
everybody's very positive about it. The intent is very positive in trying to help. I don't even know that we may not look back and try and make some of it a little retroactive and to help people who've moved forward previously.
Okay,
I don't know to what degree, but I think we can certainly work that out.
okay.
Okay.
I'll reach out to both of you. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next is Representative Sandra Scott, House Bill 719.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. I have House Bill 719. House Bill 719 is a bill that will require housing authorities to develop and implement policies granting housing preferences to veterans who are homeless individuals. There are a number of veterans out there who are seeking housing and are finding it very difficult to find safe and affordable housing. So I'm standing today to offer a solution by using the resources that we have here in Georgia with our public housing and housing administration as a way to house these men and women who have fought for our country. One homeless veteran is one that is too many. So what I'm doing again, I am asking that the housing authorities develop and implement policies granting housing preference to veterans who are homeless in the state of Georgia. As you all know, we are facing having more and more homeless veterans every day. And I did speak with the people from DC dealing with HUD, and they do have a program called VASH here that works along with Commissioner robbing them and giving funds. But that is just one avenue, and it's not enough. So I believe that if the housing authorities can look in at what they're doing and come up and develop a policy that will help our veterans to be off of the street and in homes, it will benefit the state of Georgia. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions? If not, I have a question. Oh, here we go. Representative Prince.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Scott. And as you see, I'm one of the co-sponsors of this bill. And one of the issues or concerns I had with it was the preference piece. To me, homeless is homeless, but Representative Scott, can you talk a little more about how you explained it to me? So much as, what are we doing on that?
Okay, homeless is homeless, and we do understand. But when we are talking about a veteran, one that have gone and have given their all and have sometimes given their life to be homeless coming out of the service. And we are not blind by the fact that we have a lot of soldiers that have come back from Afghanistan, who have come back from Iraq, that are facing a lot of mental challenges with PTSD and brain issues. And then we also know the function of the Department of Veterans Affairs with disability. We have a lot of soldiers that are being left out and are homeless. And I understand that we have other people that are homeless, but these are people that have fought for this country and gave us a reason to be safe and free. So I feel like a veteran deserves more than just an individual that just became homeless, because these veterans have fought and they have given to this country.
Representative Elam.
I can surely appreciate what you're saying, so this is a friendly question. So when we say that we're giving the veterans preference, we're asking, I believe we have, we've identified who the veterans are, and now we're saying in the bill that we want to give them preference. Does that mean over everybody? A veteran, a homeless veteran goes to the front of the class without equivocation? Is that what this bill would do?
Right, it's just like the hiring preference that we have in place where veterans get the 10.5 point housing jobs for hiring. We're looking at the same thing for veterans that are homeless, that they do come to the front of the line.
Follow up, maybe?
Mhm.
Sure.
Okay, so we're saying that that veteran can go to the housing authority and say, I'm a veteran, prove that they're a veteran, and they immediately go to the top of the heap for housing. Okay.
That's it.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you can see, I too is a co-signer on this bill. And Representative Scott, thank you for taking the not just the initiative, but your passion around this particular topic. Can you share with this body on the 14 days piece? Because you and I had some dialogue around 14 days. I was thinking that maybe it should be longer, but for those who may be thinking about why 14 days and lines 30 and 35.
Okay, the credible evidence will give the person that's saying that they're homeless. You know, sometimes where it said the court, go back up here to line 29, the court order resulting from an eviction and action. All this is falling into terms that when a person become homeless, they want to give them 14 days to try to justify their homelessness, and when the courts have evicted them, they have a 14 days grace period to try to get into housing. As you can see, a lot of times, like they say, motels and things put them out, but they try to give them at least 14 days to stay, to give them the opportunity to be able to seek housing in other places before they put them out on the street. So all it's doing is trying to give them a little lead time and a little leeway as to be able to try to get some credible housing before they just dump them out.
Right, Mr. Chair, as a follow-up.
Sure.
So I guess one of the things, as you and I discussed, is that some organizations or entities out there may require at least 30 days because, you know, background checks or verification of some sort, want to make sure that individuals are not trying to game the system. And so, especially if they have family members along with them. So it's one thing to have a military veteran that's solo, but it's something else if they have dependents. And so just want this body to, you know, think about this process, that 2 weeks may not be ample time to do all the necessary protocols to process a military veteran that could be in the homeless status. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Prince.
Just one thing to think about here, and again, like I said, I'm a co-sponsor on this, and again, we had some of these discussions prior to, and I appreciate that explanation earlier. But it came to thought that if this bill passes the way it is, the way it's written, is there a possibility that we in the state of Georgia, because we're doing only this in Georgia, could receive more homeless veterans in our state based on the fact that they get priority in housing?
Now, Georgia's
And
not
that's just a question.
yeah, so let me just Georgia is not the only state that is providing this type of housing for veterans. I think it's a total about 20 to 30. I think it's about 30 other states is coming up with ways to house their homeless veterans because the need is so great. So Georgia is not the only one. You also have North Carolina, which I could say just that is next door. You have Massachusetts, Colorado, and you know, the list go on and on that are coming up with housing preferences to veterans across the state, because we all want to make our veterans whole. We all want to provide them with somewhere to stay. Not stating that a veteran may not be homeless for long. You know, a lot of times, a lot of veterans today, I would say, is homeless because some of them taking a year or 2 years to get their disability benefits. And when they have gotten out of the military, they have come back home, they have nowhere to go. And that's one of the reasons for a lot of the homelessness of veterans. And then we have the mental issues that also compact veterans being homeless. So I just want us to keep in mind, a lot of them is not that they will be in this position forever, but we want to make sure that they have a place that they can go to call home until they get on their feet and be able to move, because we're talking about a lot of young people, not necessarily us that have retired and old and gone on, but we are talking about a lot of young kids, mothers with kids, with children that are homeless today right here in the state of Georgia. And I don't think that they intend to stay homeless right now, that's where they are. But they're looking for ways to become citizens that can provide for their family.
Representative Clark.
I just want to say, first off, thank you so much for bringing this bill. I know it has great intentions, and I know you truly care, about the veterans, being a veteran yourself. I guess the only thing that kind of hits me a little bit that kind of makes me pull back is I do want to help the veterans who are homeless, and I do think we need to do something. And but I'm a little afraid that giving a veteran the preference before, say, a mother who and some kids who need the housing, that why should I go in front of them? What makes me better? And I do have a huge heart, and I do think we need to do a lot better here in Georgia to clean up this whole homelessness in veterans, and it is big. I know that. But I just feel like this is kind of going against, I guess, all of our creed and our allegiance to, to putting others before us. We went to give our lives if the need be. And I just feel like this kind of could hurt somebody else who it should be the same playing field. So it's just tough to, I guess, I see the intentions, but I feel like it's going to hurt some women and children, and making us more special than them to get inside from the cold or to get a bite to eat. So that's my concerns. But then again, thank you so much. I know the intentions are to help them out, and for that, thank you.
Representative Elam.
Mr. Chairman, I have 2 points, if I may. What would, in the bill as it's written now, what would prevent a person from Montana, a veteran, getting on the bus, coming to Georgia, and immediately falling into this class and go to the front of the line to get housing? If it's a Georgia veteran, see, I'm just saying, what, you follow what I'm saying? What is going to prevent a veteran from another state to just come to Georgia? I mean, is there going to be, are we going to define what a Georgia veteran is? Or are we doing this for just any veteran?
Well, I don't think that is defined in here, because I guess I never gave it a thought that someone just pick up and come to Georgia, because now Montana have its own, but I do understand where you're coming from. Maybe that could be something that can be added to it, but I do not think that this bill will drive the homeless situation in Georgia up no more than in the other state, because there is other places that they can go that already have this opportunity. So it's not just a Georgia opportunity. Other states already have it.
And our border states, I know, like obviously Florida, Alabama, South Carolina, someone could easily, come across there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a concern, okay?
Okay.
Just think about it. Okay. A follow-up
Mhm.
question, sir? Sure. Okay. My other point is from the landlord-tenant perspective. And, of course, we have very detailed landlord-tenant laws, which I'm obviously very knowledgeable about. That's what I do for a living. Would this, let's say that a landlord has a veteran that's living in their property, and they've gone through the process to have them moved out of the property. Is this bill in any way going to allow the veteran to extend that period? In other words, as the law is right now, when the judge says, hey, you've got to move, that person has 7 days. In Georgia law, landlord laws, he has 7 days to leave. Now, are we saying that we're going to extend that to 21 days for the veteran, or does it have anything to do with that, the landlord-tenant relationship?
Right here, asking for 14 days, but that is the point that Representative Jackson made. Looking at 14 days, but I do understand what you said. A landlord-tenant agreement is 7 days, so that would be something that would have to be looked at, because here it's saying 14 days.
Follow, sir?
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, if we do get into it seems like we're edging into the landlord-tenant situation. That's very detailed law, and I'm very comfortable that we need some additional guidance in that area.
Well, I'm certainly not an expert on that, but I had some questions myself, and I don't know about what the federal rules are. Aren't most public housing ventures federally subsidized in some way, which with HUD and would have some basic requirements? Would they be able to adopt these types of rules if we passed it here without some kind of federal consent?
Well, I sent the bill to HUD up in D.C., and like I said, that they thought that it would be something that can be meaningful here in the state of Georgia, because, like I said, other states have passed a housing preference bill for the veterans in their state. Like I said, it did say that they have a program that they work along with the Department of Veteran Affairs, but we all know that it is not enough to provide for the amount of homeless soldiers that we have here in the state of Georgia. So this was just looking at another way that we could help get some of our homeless veterans off the street.
Well, I'm very familiar with the homeless. I've had a condo in Midtown for about 15 years now, since 2003, and when they moved them from downtown proper because of tourism down to Midtown, certainly there was a great influx of them. I've talked to many of them. I go out every night and walk my dog about 10 o'clock, and they're out there. We used to have a park right across from where we are now that's a high-rise, but they used to sleep on the park benches and on the grass, and they were certainly always looking for donations to whatever cause that they may be willing to put it towards. But and I guess I feel empathy for all of them, but I'm like some of these other people here. I have real concerns about the homeless veteran who may have put a lot in for his country, but should he displace a mother and 3 or 4 children who are homeless also, that has no place to go, and that's a difficult issue. I don't know who resolves that. Whether the housing, if we specify in here that without any regard for them, that he's got priority, that I think that's kind of being on the prefaces of being dangerous to family health.
Okay.
Everybody here, as I look around at the people on the committee here, including yourself, everybody here is a veteran, and we certainly all want to do what we can to assist veterans. And it's very obvious to me that there's a significant problem. We have 22 veterans a day that commit suicide, and I'm from Savannah, and we've got them downtown in Savannah. They live under the bridge, and they live under the bridges here, and they're all over Midtown. And as I said, most of them I talk to purport to be veterans. I'm not sure that they all are, but I've got a good friend that's the director of public health here in Fulton County, and her husband's a physician at Grady, and his job is to treat the homeless. And she tells me that her husband has anxiety all the time because they come in and he treats them, he gives them pharmaceuticals, he tells them how to take care of themselves, and 6 or 8 weeks later they come back and they're worse off than they were the first time he saw them. So, but it looks to me like we could tighten it up a little bit before I don't know whether we have anybody here anybody else in the audience that has any commentary? Department of Veterans Affairs.
Basically 2 points. One, the general concept of the proposal, the department fully supports. Last week, we had a meeting of the returning veterans task force, and the staff director from the council of accountability for the who's a member of the task force, made the comment, when we talked about this piece of legislation, that one of the biggest things that they see over there in all of the accountability reports that contributes to individuals coming into conflict with state law is homelessness. And so she expressed her support for this legislation. So I was pointing on that to the committee.
I think we're all on board about trying to do something about the homeless problem, and particularly with veterans. Certainly, I've always wondered what happens in military service for people to come out. Like I said, all of us participated too, and I served 13 months in Vietnam in the Marines, and everybody but my wife thinks I'm still normal. So, but it's a difficult issue. You think we could impose upon you to go back and get some assistance and helping to tighten things up?
Oh, yes.
Or would you rather? We can put it to.
I did send it to Commissioner Robin them, and I think that they made a change or two on it. So I would just have to go back to the drawing board.
I think the
and
big
look at
change is to determine what preference would mean. I mean, it's like we say here: are we going to take a single veteran who is going to displace a woman and her 4 children who are desperately in need of housing too? And a veteran probably can take care of herself on the street, some better than others, but I don't know that a woman and 4 children are near as adequate about doing that as their male counterpart, particularly a single fellow who's been in the military service and has some degree of ability for self-preservation.
Okay, let me, I understand what you're saying, but just want to be aware now, we do have hundreds of female veterans that are homeless, that are out there in the street with children, so when we talking about comparing a woman that have never gone to work, put in anything to society, as opposed to a woman that have gone and gone in a combat zone or gone in the military and did their duty. Again,
I think that should be a consideration, given those two equal, or unequal. I mean, the equation there is you're taking people in the same situation, one who's been a veteran and one hadn't. I think the veteran should probably have the upper hand there. But again, I go back to the single male veteran who lives on the street, as opposed to the female with 2 or 3 children who probably aren't getting proper nutrition. They live in a dangerous domicile when they're sleeping in alleys and even in shelters. And I'll tell you another question that came up. I used to be Georgia's Homeland Security Director, and I went to a conference in Portland, Oregon one time. I don't know how many of you have been to Portland, Oregon. The streets there are just crowded with people who are disabled and have all kinds of problems, and many who are homeless. And at the conference, I asked a local person who was a captain on the state police there why that was the case, because it's colder there than it is here, and typically homeless people try and gravitate towards a warmer atmosphere. But he said it's because of their social programs, that they have so many programs for people who are destitute that people migrate to Oregon to take advantage of those. And I understand that mentality. I mean, that's just human nature, to get the best deal you can. We're all going to try and do that. But I got a couple more questions here.
okay.
Representative Edom.
Just in the process, Mr. Chairman, of tightening it up, I really think we should look at the landlord-tenant situation and what those exact days, and does that extend the 7 days that already exist there? Or are we talking about someone that's in a property and being evicted, or just someone that's homeless and now they're coming and need help?
And see, you're an expert in that. I have no knowledge. The church that right across from our condo feeds homeless people on Saturdays, and my wife and I were headed somewhere one day, and there was a lady out there pushing a baby carriage. My sense is that she probably had her belongings in there, but my wife thought she had a child in there, and she was just beside herself, wanted to go back and make sure that child wasn't out there in a homeless environment without some kind of protection.
Well, Mr. Chair, it's just not clear to me. Are we talking about, and I read it 2 or 3 times, but are we talking about someone that could be in this category that's in a property right now? The landlord has gone through the process to have them leave. The judge has made a decision, but now the judge has to now consider not only they're a normal person and give them their 7 days, but is that judge going to have to say, okay, no, I give them additional 14 days, or I give them 14 days total, or and if we do that, I'm quite confident we need to get the landlord-tenant folks at least involved in the discussion.
And I think we're willing to work with you. Certainly, we're all very positive about trying to do something to help it. We just feel like maybe we could tighten it up a little bit, make it more effective, and make it easier for the people in the housing program to determine how they ought to go about this with a sense of fairness.
Okay. Okay.
One
Any
more
more?
question here.
Okay.
Yep.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My own sense, and I think that a lot of good points have been raised, is that the last paragraph, and really the crux of the bill, kicks a lot of those decisions to the housing authority to create those types of policies. So we don't necessarily have to figure them out here, but rather this legislation would give that housing authority the discretion to either decide if it were a Georgia-based veteran, or how to make decisions with respect to families and priorities and things like that. So I just wanted to weigh in and say that I'm comfortable with the current form of the legislation, because I think those difficult rubber meets the road rules will be made by somebody else, but we're setting the overall policy structure, which would be that there's a preference for the veterans.
Anybody else in the audience that would like to weigh in on this? We certainly thought this was going to be a quick meeting. Hearing none, do I hear anything from any of the members of the committee with regard to the bill?
I'll move to pass.
We have a motion to pass and a second. All in favor? Any further discussion? Sure.
Representative Holcomb, now are you saying that the housing authority then could clarify this in relation to having the judge extend the period of time that person remains in that property for additional, or how are you interpreting that?
I don't think that can be changed. The judge's order is the judge's order, and that would need to go back to the court. It's just if an individual loses housing, which then I believe that the intent of this is that after somebody then loses their nightly shelter, then for any consideration by a housing authority that the veteran would be given a preference, and then the housing authority would, under this legislation, if approved and enacted into law, would set the policies and procedures by which that would be implemented.
So we're not talking about where a homeless veteran is in a property and the judge would be required to extend that period then. With that 7-day period, they're out. Now they fall under this because they're now homeless.
That's the way that I'm reading it, and I think the key section is lines 43 through 47, and this agency or housing authority would not have an ability to trump a judge's order. That's at the top of the food chain.
And my guess is the housing authority is going to make a lot of decisions about these because they're going to do a background check. They're going to, find out whether the guy has a record of convictions. If he has problem with substance abuse, and they certainly they do that with all their people to try and make sure that they have a neighborhood environment that's conducive to good behavior. So. Okay, we have a motion and a second. No further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
You got your money's worth. Okay, moving on to House Bill 750 with David Clark, Representative Clark.
Thank you, Chairman, and to the committee members. Have House Bill 750, and the reason for why I'm carrying this bill is, I'm currently able to go in and get a free driver's license from my time in the service and overseas in combat. But I think looking at it, you don't go sign up, or at least from my viewpoint, you're signing up just because it's peacetime or wartime. The war chooses you. You go to serve just to serve your country, and I know I would have signed up even if it was storming the beaches of Normandy. I wanted to go serve, but I kind of see that that if you do not serve during wartime, not even that you served in combat or on a deployment, then you can get your driver's license for free. And someone who served during peacetime, they can't. And I think it's just a great thing for BRAC maybe coming in the future. It's just a small gesture to say, hey, we support all veterans, thank you. And I think it kind of separates veterans of, ones who are in combat, ones who are in peacetime. And I think we all served honorably. And and also I see that, you have to be here for 2 years, so you cannot just come in and grab a driver's license for free. You have to be here for 2 years. So automatically, driver's license go for, I think it's 8 years. So we do have about 700,000 veterans here in Georgia, but I think it's just a small token, and also just includes all veterans as one instead of just if you served during a time of war. So if you have any questions, we're glad to answer it, but I just feel like it's just a small token to say thank you, and it makes us a even more friendly military state for veterans.
Representative Holcomb?
I didn't have it lit, but I like it.
Oh, okay. Representative Elam?
Would we have to have a fiscal note on this, Mr. Chairman? Would we require a fiscal note on this?
I don't know whether we would or not. I thought somebody from Driver Service would be here because they said something to me the other day about it, but I don't know. In all honesty, maybe you talked to them.
Negative. But I will say, I went and I did the numbers and all that. I think looking also that I know my life sentence, I've not got the free one just because I left my DD-214, because you have to bring all that stuff in. So a lot of times I'm like, I'll just pay the $32. But I think a bigger thing is you have to be your DD-214, so you got to go dig it up. I think a lot of us, a lot of us, if I ask you right now, where's your DD-214, you'd be like, I'm not sure, it's somewhere in the house. Or so I think more there's not an exact note because, you have 700,000 veterans, and I think every 8 years, if every single one went in, and they were also here for 2 years. So you can't go out of state, come back, you have to be here for 2 years living in state. That would be about $22 million every 8 years if every single veteran, and they were here for 2 years and all that. So I think this is just a great way to say, hey, Georgia gives a free license to veterans. We thank you. We're a military-friendly state. And I think it's just great for, in case a BRAC comes down, this is a small token, an easy one. It's bigger than, the push to maybe eliminate the state income tax for veterans, which I'm not saying I'm against. I'm just saying I think this is a great small token to say thank you to everybody, and I think it's a great bill.
Representative Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Representative Clark, I'm just trying to decipher lines 22 to 23. All members or former members of the National Guard or Reserve Forces who have 20 or more years credible service therein. So is that only for those National Guard Reserve Force members of 20 plus years?
Yes, I mean, unless they served on active duty in combat or during that time.
So, and the reason why I'm highlighting that, although I'm retired and I've never been on National Guard, but it's all active duty, but we are, in the last 15, 16 years, we have supplemented duty with our National Guard members. So with exception of them either been active duty, they really been supplementing our forces in Afghanistan and other places around the globe. So I'm just trying to identify why we're separating the two.
I think actually, I was looking at that, and I would actually ask the committee to actually scratch that, because I understand that 48th is part of the 3rd ID now, so they deploy alongside them. So if they want a certain group, they're coming. So I know they're deploying 2019
That's
to
correct.
Afghanistan. So I actually say scratch that, because now we have changed the fighting forces now. It's all mixed together,
That's
pretty much
correct.
100% really, and it's changing. I think most states do that. If not, they're all slowly changing towards that. So great question, and I mean I would ask the committee to, to scratch that out, and let's move forward to say all veterans, because I think it makes sense, and it really makes stands us out, saying we're truly a veteran-friendly state.
Right.
And I think it's just a small token to say thank you. And I think also is, you know, being 11 Bravo, being the front lines, kicking the doors is, I think I'm no better than somebody who's support or somebody who's back on base while doing the same job, supporting each other, so we can be the #1 fighting force in the world. So
Yeah, absolutely, because I just don't want us to differentiate between the two fighting forces. So, Mr. Chair, I would, you know, if it's okay with the committee, I also agree that line through lines 22 and 23. I'd like to make a motion to delete lines 22 and 23.
Yeah, we have to, we still got some questions, and let's move forward with them, and then we'll get a motion, and then we'll look at the amendments.
Okay.
Representative Elam.
My point is that obviously this is law now, right? So paragraph 2 is the law now. Correct?
Correct.
So if we strike that, we're striking that out of the law. If we strike it,
22 and 20, yeah, striking out of the law.
so my question is, do we need to, if we strike paragraph 2, and I'm saying this for the first time, do we need to incorporate that into paragraph 1? Because we're wanting to cover those folks, right? So if we just outright strike it, are they going to be covered under 1, or do we need to?
I guess we could ask Paul,
The attorney there.
the attorney, what he thinks on that.
In reading over this, it appears to me that if the desire is to make sure no one gets excluded, that it might make sense to extract some language from paragraph 2 about members, former members presumably would be veterans unless covered by paragraph 1 provides. Members of the National Guard and Reserve Forces who have 20 more years credible service there. If that makes sense, and then you're covering someone who hasn't retired, who's active duty, or maybe I'm misunderstanding.
It's a little complicated. Sure.
In code, the term veteran is defined, because I think Representative Clark's intent is to just have veteran encapsulate anybody who is on active duty, whether or not deployed forward, and then anybody who served in the Guard and Reserve but has lived here for 2 years. I think
Yeah, 2
that's
years,
what
yeah.
you want, right?
Exactly.
So the question would be if veteran is is defined in a different area of the code, and if so, if it's consistent with his intent for this legislation, or if we need to clarify it.
Yeah, that'd be right.
We want to hold this in abeyance while he's gone and move on to the next one and then come back for the purposes of expediency. Oh, the code's right here. Oh, I thought you were gonna run back to your office and. Anybody in the audience have anything they want to contribute to the? Let's, if he can look it right up pretty quick here, it's, I was thinking I thought he was gonna have to go back to his office and get, and I have general sense, I don't know that, if somebody wants to make a motion and then, if this happens to pass, we can go back and amend it to correct, any deficiencies that we may have. We have a motion for approval. Through the bill.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Now, we're gonna wait here just a minute and see if we have a motion for an amendment. Is that proper?
No, I think we needed to do the amendments first.
That's what I thought.
If you would make a motion.
Right.
Then before that motion is carried out, there's a motion to amend.
Okay.
So if the motion passed, Representative Ewell, then seconded. That's how we would need a proper motion to amend.
If we need, Have you got-
Motion to amend,
have you got the,
delete lines
Okay.
22 and 23.
okay, we have a motion to delete lines 22 and 23.
Second.
And a second.
Incorporate that. And make sure that's incorporated into.
That's not the gentleman's motion.
To incorporate it where? You mean in section 1?
He's talking about, the motion is to delete lines 22 and 23.
That's correct. In section 1.
So, his motion is not to incorporate that back into the body of the bill.
Is it not true we want them?
But I thought Paul was looking up the code for veterans, because veteran doesn't say.
That's the determination about whether or not they're veterans or not. As National Guardsmen.
Exactly.
Let's hang on here just a minute. Well, if they're included as veterans, they wouldn't be deleted. That, yeah, if that's the case.
So we're making sure that National Guard and
we're-
Reserve Forces are all included
That's right,
as one,
that's right,
regardless of
right.
active reserve.
Let's
Okay.
see if the definition of veteran is includes National Guard and Reserve Forces, then we're fine. If not, I think we need to,
Yeah.
National Guard.
Okay.
lines 16, 17.
Yeah, but isn't that on active as, like they were on active as National Guard or Reserve? This is saying that regardless, right? Because right there it's saying you have to go active. So you had to go you had to go during wartime, really.
Right, but you already lined.
Struck that out.
17 through 20.
Yep.
So if you look at everything prior to that, immediately preceding the date of application for the license who served on active duty in the armed forces of the United States or on active
active duty in the reserve component of the armed forces of the United States, including the National Guard.
Does that include the National Guard,
That's
Mr.
what it
Higbee?
says.
But does that include just meaning they did active duty time, not drill active duty, but
Now, once you put the word
Just wondering.
National Guard, you're not defining, active or reserve or drill time.
Let's hear it from our attorney, on the board here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jags always feel the love. It's kind of nice. I think I might know how to fix it while Legislative Council is looking. If we go to line 15, and then at the far right side of the sentence, if we strike on active duty, and we insert in the National Guard, and then the sentence would read, veterans who are residents of Georgia, going up to line 12, at the time of enlistment or commissioning, and are residents at the time of application for the license, or have been residents of Georgia for at least 2 years immediately preceding the date of application for the license, who served on active duty in the armed forces of the United States, or in the National Guard, or in a reserve component of the armed forces of the United States, and then delete the comma, and then including the National Guard, and then it would pick back up at the on line 20, and who were discharged or separated under honorable conditions. I think that captures what Representative Clark is trying to do. It makes it clear that it's for anybody who has been in Georgia for at least 2 years, and it includes both active duty, National Guard, and reserve. And at the proper time, I'd be willing to make a
Okay,
a
don't we
second
already have a
motion.
motion about deleting lines 22 and 23? Is that still a motion?
yes.
Yes.
Do we have a second to that? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Now we move on to the Second Amendment, which Representative Holcomb has just read to you. I hope we have that in some written format.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, and I can repeat it. I move that we strike on line 15 the words on active, and on 16 the word duty, and then at the end of 16 the comma following United States, and then the words including the, and then on line 17 the words National Guard and that comma.
Okay, we have Amendment 2 here. Make sure we got it correct. Some things are easier to get into than they are to get out of. I thought this was gonna be a quick meeting.
I second Representative Holcomb's amended motion.
Earlier, you inserted National Guard after United States or.
He did.
You read it that last time, you just said it again.
That's what it should be, and if I misspoke, then I apologize.
Or National Guard.
Or in the National Guard.
So you want to put in the National Guard after United States or.
Or O-R.
Right.
Or in the National Guard.
So that way, it's clear that it's active duty or National Guard or reserve. And as long as you were discharged under honorable conditions and we're here for 2 years.
Okay, we got it.
Right?
Okay, we got it? Okay. We've got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you,
just want to say,
David.
Representative Jackson, thank you for catching that. I was meaning to say that when I was sitting over there, and then mine went blank, so thanks for catching that, because I want to make sure to scratch that, so thank you.
So we need to fulfill the final passage. We need to fulfill the motion to pass. Now that they're
Oh,
passed.
okay, let's get the motion for final passage. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Y'all testing me out today. Well, I went through all last year, and I think we had like 2 amendments. Representative Burnham, House Resolution 655.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Committee. I bring before you House Resolution 655, recognizing Gold Star Father Day on November the 9th annually in Georgia. And the reason why we wanted to make it an annual day was that after last year's celebration of Gold Star Fathers, where we had about 40 fathers from across the state of Georgia, we realized that there is a need. Fathers, after talking to a lot of the fathers, and as you saw today, there's a different emotion for a father than there is for a mother. And I think that they appreciated being able to express themselves to other fathers who had lost a child in either active duty or as a result of active duty. I don't know if you have any questions.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Burno, for highlighting this, and I support and attended your event. My only question to you, should we have the Gold Star Father Day like the second Monday in November? Because November 9th may fall on a Sunday or a Saturday. I was just curious if we should.
The reason why we chose the 9th was because the 9th would be Gold Star Father Day in Georgia. The 10th is the Marines' birthday, and the 11th is Veterans Day. So we can't ever tell when those days are going to occur, so it's okay if it does occur on a weekend day.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Elam.
Should we consider some possibility of having Gold Star parents rather than differentiating between mother and father? Just a thought.
Okay. It is already a federal law. I think it's the fourth Sunday in September is Gold Star Mother's Day. It's always been that way since I think it's World War II. World War One. Okay, since World War One. So mothers have always been celebrated. And the interesting thing, since you brought that up, was that the mothers were extremely supportive of the fathers having this particular day. A lot of times the fathers will attend events that the mothers attend, but not necessarily, they're just attending. It's not anything that is geared towards them specifically. And so this day would give them a chance to, experience something for themselves, not to be a part of something else, because that child has a mother and a father.
Representative Prince.
And thank you, and Representative Elam for that question, because that was my leading question. Is I agree with everything you're saying there. However, the father, the mother, the parents. I think they all grieve, differently, of course, but they still all grieve. Is it possible? I mean, that we could use this as maybe a resolution to Congress? If you're saying that this has been done since 1928, recognizing Gold Star mothers, maybe some resolution to Congress saying change from mothers to parents, because again, mother and a father, as you just said, we all grieve together.
It's already
right. It already is, but I'm saying maybe a resolution, Congress urging them to change the name of what they're representing for the Gold Star mothers.
Actually, our goal is that eventually that there will be a measure in Congress that there will be a separate Gold Star Father's Day. So
we need a Mother's Day. We need
they already have
else.
A Mother's
Okay.
Day. So we're working towards having a Father's Day. So this would be the first with Georgia, and we like being first.
Representative Clark.
Just want to say I love this resolution, and I do agree. I can see with the parents, but then having a Mother's a Gold Star Mother's Day. Definitely, I mean, I'm a man, but I see with my mom, you know, it's a special place in our heart compared to a father, and how they feel towards their kids. And I saw that, even though myself and my two brothers, we all made it back. But there's a special place in our heart for her kids and our sons and all that, sons or daughters. And so I like, you know, keeping it on the mothers because I know that's a special day. I know one of my fellow buddies who died and his mom really loves that day, you know. I mean, yes, it's both parents, but I mean, she was a single mom and all that, and and I was the only son and all that. And so I know that's a special day that she really celebrates. So I like having a Father's Day too, even though it's fine having it combined, but I understand how we've had that tradition for so long. So I like it, love it. Thank you for carrying it.
You're welcome.
Anybody in the audience? You know, I attended it, and to be honest, and had the opportunity to speak, I didn't know how this would go over, having attended many Gold Star Mother's Days, and I was shocked at the number of people that attended and the number of fathers who were willing to get up and speak. The gentleman who spoke today was there, and he did a great job, and there was another guy that was there that did a great job, although I never thought he would quit talking. And, but
Yes.
but you know, when you lose a family member like that, that leaves a pretty big hole in your heart. And he said a lot of things I think that he'd had bottled up for many, many years, and it was a great expression of love for his son and everything he'd done. And they had their whole families with them. The mothers were there and the grandparents on some occasions, and there were just a lot of military veterans who showed up just to be part of it. So I commend you on that. It was a great event. I came up for the Veterans Day ceremony and stayed over a couple of days, and initially wasn't too thrilled about that, but it was a very worthwhile endeavor, and I certainly appreciate it. So
Thank you.
we have a motion. Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Turn it off. Oh.
Hearing no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? That was an easy one, thank you.
Thank you.
And the one we've been waiting for, House Resolution 888 by Representative Jason Spencer.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I bring before you House Resolution 888. Essentially, in a nutshell, Georgia has had we've had a few rural hospitals closed down in Georgia, and you know, with the rural healthcare situation the way it is, you know, what we see in these communities as these tiny little hospitals. Some of them, if you look at this second sheet in your packet here, this is a list of the hospitals that have closed or did close at one time, and some of them reopened. And so if you look at them, some of them are 25-bed hospitals, one's a 50-bed hospital, a 40-bed hospital. But, you know, these are small rural hospitals in small communities that at one time provided a service that was meaningful to their community. And so what we see now is that you have these hospitals that sort of sit there. They are a stranded asset. Most of these hospitals are hospital authority created hospitals, which means that the hospital was created with the Hospital Authorities Act of 1941, and so in essence it's a Georgia or a county or local hospital that's there, and so now they're empty. They have closed. They are stranded assets that really can't go back into the care of maybe the county or the governing authority who created it, because there could be debt issues there. There could be other issues there. We don't know. That's the purpose of one of the things I'd like to do in a study committee is sort of probe that and explore that further. What could we do to potentially look at these hospitals and convert them into veterans homes for veterans? In Georgia, we have 2 veterans homes, Milledgeville and Augusta. But in the rural parts of the state, we have veterans too. And I think this would be one way we could sort of look at these hospitals that are sort of sitting there, not doing anything, not serving their community, a way that we could actually let's study the issue to see if we could convert these hospitals into nursing homes or veterans homes for our veterans. And so that's the gist of the resolution. Our military population is growing in Georgia. We have one of the heaviest presence in the country, and I think it's forward-looking. We need to start looking forward. We need to, I think, do something to help our rural communities. I think this is one way to look at this. We obviously would need to, my thinking would be to engage our federal partners at the VA. I've had a meeting already with Commissioner Roby, and I have given him that idea. I think Representative Rick Williams is also potentially looking at the military hospital there and sort of converting it into something serviceable to their community as well. So we're both thinking the same thing. Here we have these assets sitting in these small communities who really need some kind of stimulus in some way or another. And I think it's sad to see these hospitals sort of deteriorate and nothing can be done. I will tell you that in one of the districts I represent, the hospital in Folkston, Georgia, closed. It's just sitting there. I pass it going to Waycross and Kings Bay, doing that ride, and it's just sitting there not doing anything. It's an asset that could be used, and why not look at changing it to a potential veterans home if we can do that? So this is a study committee. It's not trying to answer that question in this resolution. It's just trying to propose a resolution and pose the question, can we do this? If we can do it, how can we do it? And how do we go forward? So that's the resolution in a nutshell, Mr. Chairman.
And I commend you for that, not just because we're utilizing vacant spaces, but it also brings care to the veterans who live in rural areas. I probably shouldn't get on the storytelling business, but I got a call from our local hospital not too terribly long ago, which is a rural hospital, and they had a veteran up there that was having problems, and he has to report for dialysis twice a week. He lives in a little town of Clio, Georgia, and he catches a bus at like 3 o'clock in the morning, a small bus, and he rides it to Savannah. He transfers there and gets on a bigger bus and goes to Charleston, has his dialysis, then makes the return trip and picks up the second bus, goes back to Clio, probably gets home at 10 o'clock at night. I explained to the hospital personnel that's just the way the VA works, and I didn't think that there would be any leniency in that. She said, that's not the kicker. This guy's blind. He's a Vietnam veteran. He's blind. The bus driver and the fellow veterans get him up there and get him back every day. And we've since been able to get him treatment at the local hospital. But, that's 120 miles each way.
Right.
And I just can't imagine that we put somebody through that is incapacitated.
Right.
But it's, without it, he's a dead man.
Right.
So I commend you.
Well, thank you.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also commend you on this. This is phenomenal, especially when you start thinking about repurposing our assets. But as you already alluded to, one of the things I think the study committee needs to examine, because we are dealing with a older population with various needs, not just physical, it could be emotional, etc. And so my recommendation is that as the study committee, not just look at the how, but the what. That's going to be critical. What services we want to provide, transportation. When you look at a population of 750,000 plus already here in Georgia, I would love to see what those demographics are, where they located. I think the second thing is the who. As we often stated already this afternoon, in terms of defining, do we open this up to military veteran family members, a widow? And what does that look like if we so happen to open it up to, because we tend to forget about the family members.
Well, you'll notice in your packet, I included sort of this is kind of old, but it's the best source I could find online that dealt with the issue.
Yep.
But it's probably it could be 10 years old, but this is the best information I could find on the issue of veterans homes. that was online, but it does talk about, who do we who do we actually bring in, services available. If you go to the very back of the last page, it says eligibility and application, and it kind of talks about that you're sort of alluding to. Do we let Gold Star parents in? Who do we let in? Do we make this a free fall? But in rural areas, these are going to, the way I sort of envision this, and I kind of know sort of, because I'm in the medical field, and I kind of know how this kind of sort of works in the nursing home side. Boy, Jesse Peachy would probably be a better person to answer this, but you've got a sick veteran population. It could be homeless. We talked about, you just guys have talked about the homeless situation for veterans. It could be, those are kind of populations could we be targeting, those that are of the most significant need in a given community. And so that's something I'm looking at, as we move forward on this, is that's the who. The who what I would like to target is the ones that need it the most. Is it the homeless veteran? Is it the, is it a spouse that has nothing now and her husband died in combat or something, and she has no children, no assets whatsoever? So you're right. That's definitely part of this. Would be the study committee's task would be to identify that.
Okay. And my last follow-up, Mr. Chairman, it will be this population also, they're already on a fixed income, right? And so I know this is a shared investment between the state, federal dollars as well, and that member. And so we have to figure out what that number is, because the quality of life is largely going to depend on what they can support. And so that's going to be a huge piece in this equation when you start talking about expenses for this population, because if we do want to expand it out to the homeless or those who are perfectly fit and they just want to retire. We had the opportunity to visit the retired home down in Biloxi, right there on the beach, 200 rooms, phenomenal place, but everybody's walking around healthy. They gamble every night, right? So we gotta really look at the who piece when we start determining that dollar cost.
And I agree with you. Definitely agree with you, and I understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Representative Clark.
I just want to say I love this. Stuff like this excites me because we're utilizing the stuff in the state, trying to see how we can help a veteran. So I love it, and I say that at the proper time that we do pass.
Thank you.
Love it.
Representative Scott.
I'd just like to echo, homeless veterans is my thing, so I thank you for this study committee, and I look forward to seeing it real soon.
Thank you.
Ready for you all to go to work.
Representative Elam.
These are covered under the certificate of need, right? No?
Well, when we start digging into this issue, what you're going to find, what you will find is that these hospitals, the public hospitals, the hospital authority created hospitals, they are likely have a certificate of need. So now what you're dealing with is local governments have created this hospital, and then what do we do as a state? Do we assess that certificate of need situation? Do we change the law to allow that? Now, some hospitals have converted into nursing homes. I know the hospital in St. Mary's, before it was sold to the Brunswick Hospital Authority, that particular hospital was sold as a nursing home, or converted into a regular nursing home. But the hospital authority in Brunswick bought that hospital, and the certificate of need would be considered an asset for that hospital, for that community, and it was transferred to the care of that. So it depends on who takes over the running and the administration of the veterans home. And so that is something we'll have to sort of tackle and address. And so I think the Rural Development Council may have ran into that. I think you may sit on that council. They may have ran into that issue when trying to address micro hospitals and things like that. And so we would probably run into the same questions as well. So.
Any other questions from the committee? Sure, John.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, is there any form or in your thinking about
seeing how much it would cost to do this versus just to give the veteran a card for his care?
Well, it's not as simple. That's not as simple as it sounds. I've worked with. I'm in emergency medicine, and I've worked with a lot of veterans trying to get them transferred to a VA hospital. And it's a very, very bureaucratic, difficult thing to do. Yeah, you know, that policy would have to come from the feds if they wanted to turn into a voucher system to allow them to take their card and go to any hospital in America and allowed to be treated. If I was king for a day, one of the things that I would do at the federal level is create such a voucher system, and that any hospital that took Medicaid or Medicare, you got to take this veteran. And that's what I would do. But in terms of the scope of that, if for this study committee, I think that would be outside of what we could do.
But just your own opinion, would one be financially better than the other for the state and for the federal?
I think once we dive into this, we're going to have to talk to our partners at the VA that does configuring and that does assessing of the asset or the hospital there to see what would work. And so a funding source would certainly be the federal government, because they would have standards that they would have to abide by in converting these hospitals into veterans' homes, because there are certain standards and regulations, I'm sure, that will have to be assessed and looked at. And so I don't think it's just as simple as giving them a card and say, here, you can go and, you know, this is where you get to live the rest of your twilight years. So I think it's a little bit more difficult than that. And that's the purpose of the study committee, because there's a lot of questions to ask.
Thank you for your work, though.
Thank you.
And it just came to mind. I probably should have thought about it when Representative Scott was up here, but you know, you probably have seen it on US 301. You know, that used to be the normal tour fare from Maine to Miami, and it was well traveled. And when they opened up I-95, all the motels on 301 closed down. And back about 20 years ago, what happened was they became homes for veterans.
Really?
Yeah, and that was the World War II Korean era, and I don't know I'm sure the VA funded that. I don't know what was different then than now, except the availability. So once again, we're posed with availability, and so you know, certainly a lot of things have changed. There's a lot of water over the dam since the last 20 years, but we have an aging population of Vietnam veterans that need care, and you know, looks like an opportunity for me. Although I don't know the cost, and that's up to the study committee.
Well, if you look, that's come up, and the Representative Jackson brought that up. If you look at sort of the breakdown of what sort of happens in the real world, that next to the last page of your packet there, that's kind of what happens. You know, you've got the veterans out-of-pocket expenses, you've got the subsidy coming from the VA, you've got other possible state subsidies coming, another possible VA aid that may come in to sort of help with the per month per stay numbers. Now, like I said, this packet's old, but this is the best I could find on the subject online. But that kind of gives you a perspective of what we're dealing with. So it's probably a combination of VA benefits and potentially Medicaid, and depending on if the WHO is a low-income person that's a veteran or the homeless. And so those are the things that we would have to look at. I don't think this is a long-term project, in my opinion. It's just not something we just jump into quickly. We've got a lot of questions to ask, a lot of things to address, and that's why I thought starting with a study committee was the best way to go.
Okay. Anybody else got anything that they would like to add to the conversation? Mr. Holt?
We had a nice conversation, I guess, about a week and a half ago about this. We didn't get into the details of it, but one question I'll just try to address with Representative Jackson. Under current federal regulations and state rules for state veterans homes, they are not governed by CON. So that would come out of the if you go down, ultimately you go down the state veterans home route. A couple other quick points. Right now the VA is paying just a little over $110 a day for a regular veteran patient. The state is picking up through two funding sources, the other 110 or thereabouts. One is through state appropriation, and the other is through a $24 and a few cents, I forget the exact number, daily fee that's paid by use that same model and go out into a more of a rural setting, on the surface appears that it would work, from a funding standpoint. We'd have to work with the VA in terms of certifications and, those kinds of things. The number of beds that you showed on your packet, I think that number is still valid. That's what the VA has approved
Oh,
for
okay.
the state of Georgia to have. We don't have that many. So we've got an excess capacity, if you will, of actual in use versus authorized by the VA to have.
Would you mind me asking, what is the authorized number?
You're right, very
Okay.
close to it. I just
Okay.
don't have the exact.
Okay.
About 700 and whatever it was, 735. We have right now, 188 at Augusta and 245 at Millersville today.
Yeah, so we've got capacity, like you said.
Yeah, we've got, in terms of authorized beds. And of course, then we can break that up into, 50 here and 20 there and so on. And I used to be, a hospital administrator at one of those hospitals that closed,
Mm-hmm.
back in 1998, out in Hancock County,
Right.
which I noticed was not on your list.
Well, actually, I spoke to, sorry, Mr. Chairman, we're having a good conversation here. I spoke to Sisty Hudson. I don't know if some of you know Sisty.
Sure.
She's the chairman of Hancock County Commission, and asked her to come, but she couldn't make it. But yeah, so she would love that idea.
Yeah, it would, she'd love to be able to do something with those 52 beds.
Yes, yeah.
But at any rate, I think where Representative Clinton's going with this in terms of doing some kind of a study, I think it is well worth the effort, because there are a lot of variables that need to be brought out, and we would be happy as Georgia Department of Veterans Services to participate in that.
And Colonel Holtz knows, last year, at their insistence, we changed the eligibility dates for admission to their facilities. It was the conclusion of the Vietnam War. Now they've moved it up to the beginning of Desert Storm. So there are a lot more people eligible. They're aging, and a lot of the people have aged out, and that's why they had the empty beds. So.
Actually, that date has not ended, because the VA still considers the beginning of Desert Storm, Desert Shield.
Right.
As the beginning of the current conflict, and they don't have an end on it yet. So, right now,
Okay.
it's open-ended as it is.
Okay, I think we've had a lot of discussion on this and everything else we've dealt with here today. Do I hear a motion? Have a motion. I have a second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? Thank you. And
Thank you.
am I correct in assuming that's the last thing on our agenda? Thank you very much for your patience. I never envisioned that this was going to be as complicated or take. Well, I've never been in here on this side, but we are adjourned.